To build hallucination-free AI knowledge, we must first quarantine cognitive biases. Observe as the network's connections strengthen, forming a reliable data foundation. This is the path to true AI understanding.
So Notebook LM is, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's a pretty solid product, and it has some very interesting capabilities. And I'm going to be exploring that a lot more in the near future. I'm taking a course, so this is a little bit of a insight into that course. I don't want to go publishing the course's content directly because obviously that's something that it's their proprietary content. I want to leave it alone in the sense that it's theirs. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to be sued for it if you want to go down that path. But I do want to share what I'm learning because some of this isn't necessarily stuff that I'm learning from the course. It's stuff that I've already covered in the past when it comes to things like data cleansing. One of the first things that I've learned, and this goes back to, I'm going to say like 2005, when I first started doing things where I was using advanced search and fuzzy logic and things like that to find specific pieces of information when I wanted it or needed it. And now really what I'm seeing is that what I end up doing most often when I help customers is I end up helping them look at their old data and revitalize it in a way that allows them to use it properly with AI. And the problem comes down to, we often hear about how AI hallucinates. And it's true, but what it's doing when it's hallucinating is, in a lot of cases, we put information into our data sets without meaning to. So if I go into something I'm going to search or something I'm going to dig into, in a lot of cases, you go to ChatGPT or you go to Grok or Claude or you go over to Gemini or whatever, and you type something in, and those models look at the internet, right? So there's a wide open source that is influenced by anything that's on the internet. It's not restricted. It's just wide open. So the hallucinations often happen because you ask a question. You don't put any guardrails on the question. You don't put any context that says, hey, this is how I want the information to be presented. This is the source information I want you to give me. I want it restricted, tight, and clean. And don't use the internet. It almost never happens. We're basically using, in a lot of cases, AI as a glorified search against the internet. And when that happens, if the way you ask the question doesn't have guardrails, the brain is like, think of a stream of consciousness perspective. If you just stop right now and listen to the thoughts going on in your own head, when you're hearing somebody, you might silence a lot of that. But if you just pause the audio and then think, it takes you a few minutes to even begin to have your own original thoughts. Whatever you heard last is kind of in your head, and it kind of shapes what you're thinking about going forward. And then at some point, you can think of this as like when we dream. Your brain just kind of drifts into its own ransacking of data. And if you hear a question, but you're not provided any guardrails, or, when the guardrails might be, hey, when you were in high school, did you study geography? Did you study geometry? Things like that. And if that was the case, did you have anything that scoped your question down to a specific class that you took, a teacher that you worked with, whatever subject that you learned? And without that kind of narrowing, you end up where you get, your thoughts are very random. And in some cases, if you don't have a solid memory of it, but somebody suggests enough in the question, your brain will actually make up memories, totally make them up. And it's the same thing that happens here when it comes to search and things like that. So when you're trying to use something like Notebook LM, The idea is that you put things into it and restrict access. You say, I don't want anything outside of this. Don't go to the internet. Don't go anywhere outside of the scope of what it is that I'm doing. And that gives you this element of what you would call cognitive quarantine. If you use cognitive quarantine, that means you're saying, don't go to the internet. Don't think outside the box. Think inside of what I'm asking you to look at. And you basically create what's called an isolated clean room. And the grounding principle is the idea that you say, stay within the the fine confines of this clean room so that you don't hallucinate. And when you do something like that, you end up with content that can be citation oriented. So it's like, where did you get this? Well, I got it on page 4 of XYZ document that you uploaded into this library. And that's very clean and very useful when you're trying to get something specific out of a knowledge base. But if you're not, if you don't do that, what ends up happening is you have this wide open space, and if you don't put the guardrails on really tightly with the way that you do your prompt, you're going to get hallucinations or wild, wild west kind of search results that came out of everything that it was able to find or come up with, make up, because it doesn't have any kind of guardrails. Now, like I was saying, the thing that I do most often is I go into somebody's content and say, let me bring this back to the root and see what you have in that library, and let's narrow it and narrow it and narrow it and make sure that everything is formatted in a way that you can actually read. So that's creating what's called single source discipline. The hard part about doing that for an existing database or an existing data set is that there's no authority in many cases. You go back, you look at the content, and maybe something was written last year and it was valid last year, but there have been 5 versions of something newer since then. News could be coming out that tells you, hey, that's old school. That study is from forever ago. It's no longer valid. And if that's the case, how do you find an authoritative source to make sure that you're not really putting in stuff that's just out of date? You want to archive the stuff that's out of date and bring in the most recent. And that's always a lot of hard work, because you have to go find the stuff in the new context. Maybe it's easy if you have up-to-date news that you could just pull in today. Like all the news that I went over at the beginning here, that news was today's news. Yesterday's news, I wouldn't want to go over it again. And if I told you a headline from 20 years ago and it didn't have any relevance to today, you'd be saying, that's a useless piece of information. I don't need it. I don't want it. And the same thing goes for AI. You want to be able to, one of the biggest handicaps, in my opinion, that was self-imposed by ChatGPT was the fact that you couldn't search anything newer than 2 years old. Do you remember that when ChatGPT first came out? You couldn't look at anything newer than 2 years old, because they wanted to make sure that they weren't going out to the internet. They weren't getting contamination. They had a curated library. And I can't remember, but it feels to me like we still had hallucinations then, but the constraint was that you had that older content. And new content with limited controls is going to hallucinate, but older content that you put controls on, like you don't let anything newer come in. How useful was that? I mean, I almost think that, I know I didn't use ChatGPT for quite a while, only because I was thinking, every time I did a search for something, it said, yeah, that's too new. I can't give you any information on that. So when Grok came out, I was like, hey, this is great. It's up to date. It's got real-time information. I can get latest news on things. And that was good. Now, I still had the issue, and there are still lots of issues with hallucinations if you don't put those constraints on your prompts. But, you at least have up-to-date content, which is really important these days. So source engineering, to me, If you can do it at the beginning, wonderful. That means drag and drop the files, only the files you want to work on, into a thing, and don't allow it to go outside of that. So that's kind of the explanation of the idea of having an isolated data source for your AI. And then the source engineering is trying to make sure that you refine it and keep it to the latest, and make sure that you don't have anything that causes a negative impact. And now I'm going to do kind of a demonstration of a real-time situation in what exactly the context of what I was just talking about. So Notebook LM is one of the things that I use. It's one of my tools for research and digging. But another tool that I use, it's really more for linking and finding connections between things, is this product called the Brain. Now, the Brain, the way that I use the Brain is I'll put these, what they call thoughts, in here. Now, a thought, typically what I'm putting in are, I put the thumbnail from all of the videos that I've done, the title, and then the body content for each one of these is actually the timestamps of the video that I create, so that you can identify where within this video you would want to go to learn something or understand something. Now, that's all good, but what I'm trying to get out of this is, because I have those timestamps, I want to find where, if there are places where I talk about something like mind mapping or timelines or whatever, I want to find all of the other connections where I talked about it in previous episodes. And that's because in the not too distant future, I'm going to try and start creating some additional content, and I'll go to those timestamps and say, what videos did I talk about this, and see if I brought up one tiny little point that was useful across those videos. And that's what we're gonna do here. Is I've got this prompt that I created over here that says, using the descriptions in each one of these thoughts, I want you to identify common tags and normalize the tags. And just so you are aware, there's a tag library here that's been created as I went through some of these, creating some of these thoughts. Each one of these thoughts, I'm taking the actual tags that I use in a YouTube video when I create a YouTube video. So here's the dashboard of a YouTube video that I might have. I'll grab one of these, and let's say I go to episode 28. I've got my timestamps and I've got my descriptions, but down here towards the bottom is I have this tag list, and YouTube kind of likes the tag list because it shows who might be interested in this based on the tags. So, from the algorithm being able to say, who should I present this to? And that's what I'm going after here, is linking these tags to the thoughts so that I can go find the connections between these videos. So now I'm going to go ahead and give the embedded AI Cerebro, which I don't know how visible that is, and I can't really zoom in the UI itself, so I'm just going to leave it up here in the top right. But it says Cerebro. This is the AI that's embedded within this product, the Brain, and it's asking me permission to look into each one of these thoughts in order to read the tags, tag list, and identify things. So I'm giving it permission to go ahead and look at all of those different episodes and find the tagging, find the topics that can become a tag, and then it's going to go back and get the tags that are already out there assigned to certain thoughts, and then it's going to compare what's in the individual item and normalize between the two, so that for the episodes that I never tagged, it will actually create a tag library. Now, this is a discrete library, very specific to only what I put in here. So I've been curating this content for the past 2 months so that I have very specific data that the AI can work against and see what kind of connections I can make between these episodes. So now that it's done that, you probably didn't see much going on in the background there, but I'm going to change the view. First, I'll close the AI, And I'm going to bring this Plex view up. And you can see that the connections between the different thoughts are these additional lines. So there's a lot of lines that are already here. What we're going to try and do, and let me just see if I want to go back and see if there are any. So it did some normalization of the library. So it normalized some of these tags. And what I'm going to say is now apply. Now apply tags to any untagged thoughts and use them to connect the thoughts with links. There we go. So let's see how that goes. And if all goes well, what we'll see is it's got the tags already, because we saw that up above. And we're going to see about whether or not the tagging goes into effect. What I'm looking for is an expansion of these links. You know, it's probably, yep, it looks like it's adding tags. You can see the little tag icons being added to individual thoughts that weren't there before. And the one thing that's going to be curious is over here in the thoughts that don't have an episode, that it's applying tags to those. So we'll see. It could just be because of the title, The Second Sip, and episode numbers. But now that that's done, let's go take a different view, and we're going to look at the mind map view. There we go. So we've got a few. It didn't tag as many as I expected or had thought that it would, but we'll see if maybe the instructions are telling me I need to do the next step. If you'd like to be more granular tagging and linking, I can. So yes. Continue with the tagging and linking at a granular level. And let's see what happens now. So this is, it always asks for permission, which I really like in the embedded AI, because if it didn't, it could get really ugly. So what I'm expecting to see is these tags kind of expanding or growing here. And now we've got to give it permission to modify. There we go. And it looks like it just created a link right there. It may or may not ask permission to do individual links, but we'll see. Looks like it's kind of digging in. So this is the kind of thing where you can get some value out of AI from a knowledge base that isn't obvious and this is nothing like going out and just searching for an answer using AI. We're actually doing something that gives me a little more insight to the content that we have here in a way that's useful, not just find me an answer. So let me see here. If you want the next step to be use notes and keywords to refine these tags, what I would like to see is an expanded set of links between different episodes that are individual thoughts are saved in the individual thoughts to find connections between topics. An example, giving it constraints here, are links similar to the one between, between the second sip 4 and the second sip 32. So the idea is I'm trying to give it an example based on something that's already there so that it knows I'm looking for more of that. There, let's just see how that does. So this is it's typical to do some kind of an iterative process when it comes to using AI. I don't often see enough examples of real use cases where you're trying to find these types of connections. In this case, just getting the links built in a way that's useful. I don't see that kind of, it's like, okay, create a table for me, gather information for me, scrape a website, but being able to actively go create links that don't exist today and build on it. Let's see if we can do that. Proceed. So I'm just trying to get it. I'm seeing like a couple of more links starting to show up, and I'm hoping that it will. The last time I did this, I noticed that I had to tell it proceed, 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 or continue, yes, 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 about 5 or 10 times before it did everything, because it's very careful not to overdo something in case what it is doing is incorrect or is outside the scope of what I would really want. So it looks to me as though I'm starting to see an occasional link here and there pop in that wasn't there before. And that's, I can't say that it's going to do, yes, proceed. As I said, it'll continue one question at a time, even though it's a little bit slow, but it's not that bad to be able to just say, yep, keep going, keep going, keep going. This is what I want. And then it'll take action and do the things that I'm asking it to do one step at a time. And that is, like I said, that's a good thing because you don't want it to go too crazy. Yeah, it looks like it really is doubling down on a couple of these links because it's, probably a couple of redundant links that are occurring because of multiple tags on one topic. So do a quick pass only for the remaining lonely episodes and add at least one conceptual tag. So every episode has multiple graph-based entry points. Yeah, I think proceed one more time. And that, some of this, I don't always talk about the same topic. So it's not surprising that there aren't dozens of these. I was thinking we would probably get a couple of links here and there just as a result of doing the second sip periodically. So, but we'll see. It does look like it did a fair amount of tagging and it did a fair amount of linking. And that, it's a win. I expected more, but that's also not surprising because sometimes you think you talk about the same thing over and over again, but perhaps I didn't. And that's totally cool. There we go. New tags were created. And it looks... it's definitely curious. And I know that a lot of the tags that are going to show up down here, which are, I created these thoughts just in preparation for future episodes, but they're not all, they're not all identified here. So draw links between thoughts with common tags. I'm just trying to make it absolutely clear that I want to see more connections when there's tags that are related. I don't know if it's going to, I'm not really 100% sure Yes. The last thing, and then I'm going to stop. But this idea is that by having all of these connections, I should be able to, I'm hoping I'll be able to find these common threads between different topics. And even though I'm pushing because I'm really just trying to see more of these floating thought connections, I don't know that it's going to do any more because I've already beat it up quite a bit. And I know I do talk about different topics every day. So it should be pretty logical that I'm not going to get a crazy amount of visual connections between these thoughts. There we go. So some of the cross-linking I may not be able to see here because of the way that I'm looking at it, but I'm going to wait until it's done. And it also may just be that I need to go back and forth between the different views before it refreshes and shows me what I'm looking for here. So let's try normal mode, and then I'll go back to the layout that is outline. There we go. You can see a lot more interlinking between thoughts there. And then if I go finally back to mind map, there. Yeah, I think that there's probably connections that I'm just not able to visualize here because of the way that the Plex is laid out. But if I go for thoughts, I can clearly now see that these 6 thoughts have critical thinking as one of the tags. So for every single topic that I want to talk about, when I want to dig in and find something a little bit interesting, if I want to, how many times did I talk about Grok? How many times did I talk about, let's say, Coffee with Scott Adams? That deeply. It's interesting that I'm not seeing. I was expecting more, so maybe I just have to figure out what's wrong with my method and go back and figure that out. And that's the experimentation. That's the practical application where you discover what is the way that is going to get you the results you're looking for. And in the long term, the results I'm looking for, hey, I want to do a video about AGI. Where did I talk about it? These are the 4 episodes I used. Now I can go in and pull those. But I really want to find out as much as possible whenever these keywords or tags come up that, I would think that there are more than one. And maybe what I need to do is probably modify the time signature, ask it to look at the time signatures in each one of the thoughts. Because if I go like into this one here and I look at the content directly, let me just, there. So if I'm looking at episode 29, it doesn't look like I have a topic on that one. Let's go back to this one here. There we go. So if I look at the time signatures instead of tags and say when keywords come up between the time signatures, I might get better results. So it's an experiment, and I'm going to see how it goes. I'm going to continue working on this. Hopefully, this will lead to something, very interesting, rather than just having to go search manually through all of this stuff. So let's go back to my original view. We're going to do the normal view, and I'm going to, I have to figure out if I need to deselect. I don't want to delete the thought, but I want to deselect the thought. And it looks like I've kind of landed on it. So we'll just go back home. There we go. Anyways, I hope this was interesting for you. It kind of that discover what kind of, when you use AI, what are the different kind of use cases? The general use case for the most part, in many cases, I think has to do with search. Like I said, for us traditionally, most people, it's just a powerful search, a really impressive search. And it doesn't become a tool that you can use to do other things with. But when you do decide you want to start using it as a tool for other tasks, then use cases like this one might become more relevant. and also knowing that the only way you're going to get the kind of content that you want is to have isolated sources so that it's not hallucinating. You can see here that the linking that I'm trying to do, it doesn't really leave much room for hallucination, because I'm saying only in these items find the connections. And so that's the kind of, in a perfect world, that's a use case that stays very tight and restricted, and you don't go out into these giant big searches and it hallucinates because it can't find the content, or because if it does find the content, it's not enough of an answer and it embellishes in order to do what it thinks you want, which is to just find an answer. So we'll come back to this at some point. It's kind of a demonstration of using this source engineering and single source discipline to stay within the bounds of what I'm doing, and then have a real world application for how to work on that information in a way that makes it more useful than it is today. So that's pretty much what I had to talk about today. I hope that was something that you enjoyed or found useful, and maybe you'll be able to use it in your own AI future use cases. With that, I will wrap it up. One more quick little sip for you. I hope you have a great day, and that you can be as useful as AI wants to try to be in your own life, and find some value in what you're doing with your day-to-day activities, like I'm trying to do. Anyways, cheers. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. And of course, moving the mouse. Bye-bye now.
And that's how we build a clean knowledge base. Cheers to your AI success.